I'd like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we get 3 inches of rain in the next hour, these drains really work well, so we don't have to worry. The water will just flow right by your feet. No one will get swept away, I promise. But tonight we're going to have a presentation of township facilities and infrastructure. Bob?
President, what we do is we have a presentation put together. Steve had put a lot of this information together with Tammy. Steve's going to step through the presentation that talks about our basic infrastructure from storm sewers, sanitary sewers, traffic signals, and facilities here in the township. So Steve, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. And everybody, welcome to the Public Works facility. I'm glad you're all here. If anybody wants to take a walk around when we're done, please do. We'll take you around. And if anybody remembers from the from the reorganization we had, really officialized Public Works taking over the facilities, the parks, the bricks and mortar, if you will, not the programming or anything like that. And the manager asked us to come up with a plan, an inventory, if you will, of the issues that need to be addressed, and that's what this is about. So we're here to provide a high-level review of the costs associated with updating, maintaining, and or replacing the components of the township infrastructure and facilities. As with many, literally all municipalities, aging infrastructure is very serious and costly. We are not alone in years of inaction that have left our infrastructure in need of repair, many costly projects in the near and foreseeable future. We'll start with infrastructure and broken that down into 4 basic categories: sanitary sewer, storm sewer, traffic signal, and bridges. The resurfacing program, which is our infrastructure, we really tie that to our liquid fuels money. We could do more, but I think the liquid fuels is adequate to keep us up. Sanitary sewer. We have 128 miles of sanitary sewer in the township. And I got to throw out some thanks to people on different parts of this. Steve Amarant, who's here, he's in our sewer division. He was instrumental in providing a lot of this information. Mark Dominic, Paul Totaro, Peggy Hagan really put all this stuff together for us. Jennifer DeStefano, Paul Basic, Tammy Cohen. So the township sanitary sewer system dates back to the turn of the 20th century. So right off the bat, when you have an infrastructure that's over 100 years old, you know there's going to be issues. And due to this fact, much of the sanitary sewer in the older neighborhoods is undersized, not able to be mapped, or it's severely deteriorated. And we have a list of projects that have been around for a long time and haven't been addressed. And we put some price tags to them. And again, these are high-level prices. If these were to go to budget, we would sharpen our pencils more. We're just trying to give folks the idea of the magnitude of the cost of some of these. And any project in the North Wayne area and even South Wayne is going to be costly just because of the age. So we have the Courtney Pump Station, which we're decommissioning, and that's in design. The board gave us permission to do that. We do have 2 small pump stations which are in need of a complete upgrade, Woods Lane and Hermitage Drive. Okay, so you remember liquid. This is a list of projects here. This was the top 10. So I'm just going to pick some of the bigger ones. Bloomingdale Avenue in Runnymede, replaced 2,000 feet of 6-inch terracotta line and 12 manhole. This line runs in the street and under buildings. And again, we have sewer lines that run under houses and run under buildings. They were built in the turn of the century. We don't know why, we just know they do. After the presentation, if anybody wants to look, that pipe that's all broken up there, this is what one of the emergency projects the board allowed us to do, was to replace some line on Conestoga Road. That's what's in the ground, and that's not even our oldest pipe. Poplar Avenue. Here's an older section of town. They have flooding issues. The sanitary sewer is over 100 years old. We don't know when they put the storm sewer in. Nothing runs in a straight line. We're not even sure where everything goes. And this just goes on and on. So if you want to look at it in terms of miles, if it helps everybody, instead of talking about linear feet, there's 2 miles of sanitary sewer that are needed to be replaced, within the next 5 to 10 years. It's hard to see, but this is the stuff these guys deal with every day. Grease in the sewer lines, which causes backups. It comes from restaurants. I have to say our codes department is fantastic in helping us once we find this and going to the restaurants and trying to make them comply. You folks can't see much here, but if you could, on my screen, it shows a manhole filling up with sewage because the line is clogged. And that's another thing these guys deal with every day. Decaying manholes. If you look at the upper right picture, those little black dots are actually roaches, but those are bricks that are falling apart. You'll see root intrusion on the bottom. These things are 60, 70 years old, and they need to start to be replaced. We try to always look at revenue and funding, and one of the items was the board gave us permission to have Gilmore & Associates, our township engineer, provide a quotation determining a tapping fee for ongoing funding of the sanitary sewer. Tapping fees are based on capacity, and they would be paid by a developer or somebody building in the township based on the amount of capacity that they need for their building. And that can help provide an ongoing source of income for replacement, and it can only be used for sanitary sewer. It's hard for everybody to see this, I'm sure, but here are some costs we associated with the projects. Those small pump stations are still $100,000 outfits when the time comes. Look at the total in the 0 to 5 year period, it's over $1 million. We go to the 5 to 10 year period, it's another $2.5 million. Now, just so everybody knows, these prices and these timelines, they can be slid. I'm not trying to say to everybody this is what has to absolutely happen, because obviously funding is a huge issue, and the reality of it is when something breaks, we can just fix that spot. I don't recommend it because we've done it so many times that some of these lines are in really bad shape. If we were going to do something on Poplar, I would recommend that we do it in conjunction with a storm sewer project. So then that entire area would get modernized with storm sewer and sanitary sewer. So we do need to look at the whole list, the whole view. Storm sewer. The Cheving, this is really highlighted by Wednesday night's storm, or the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning storm, where we got, by different accounts, 3 to 5 inches of rain in the period of about an hour. By all accounts, that's over a 100-year frequency storm. The Chagrin Valley Engineering Report, dated July of last year, provides an excellent high-level look at stormwater management issues in the township. As noted in the report, the total estimated cost to address stormwater management issues is over $45 million. Now, a large portion of that was purchasing properties. The one thing it does not do, because it's a high-level report, doesn't include many of the smaller projects, the repairs, the replacements. We have in this township 87 miles of storm sewer and 1,800 inlets. During significant rains, areas of the township experience life, health, and safety risks. This is just a few of the streets, but these are the most common: the North, South Wayne, Poplar, Oak, Forest, Midland, St. David's, and Willow. And really what this talks to is, and we've mentioned it before, there's been a lot of studies done. Many have been performed. We know the problems. Now we must determine how to fund the solutions. Stormwater funding. A mechanism to fund stormwater issues must be found to deal with flood mitigation, planning, prioritization, mapping, and evaluation, maintenance, replacement, repair. Here's some storm sewer costs. Most of these are in the budget. They were not funded, but they were noted in the budget, and it's under water quality. Radnor Middle School stormwater management improvements. That project is to do the final leg that was never completed, which would take stormwater from West Wayne and South Wayne and get it into the middle school system. That system was never fully built. It actually stops way down on School Lane. There was some utility conflicts, I believe, which derailed that whole project. And we go down the line. Here's some of the small ones. There's a culvert that needs to be replaced on Strathmore Drive. We've had emergency storm sewer repairs. We've had, this figure is actually no longer valid. The North Wayne Field stormwater management system, we know that is over $100,000 after the last meeting. Culvert replacements, Marlbridge Drive. These are in, for lack of a better term, the Beaupre area down near Rosemont. Orchard Way, Strathmore, Arden, Sawmill, and those projects tally up to over $2 million. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to see this, but this is actually a televising of a storm sewer pipe that collapsed on Barleycone Drive. I got to thank Peggy Hagan for actually embedding this into the PowerPoint. Okay, right at that spot, I guess it's not worth it, you folks can't see it, but there is no side left to the pipe. The concrete's totally deteriorated. You'll have to take my word for that. But yes, Mr. White's correct. You can see the roots dangling in there. Okay, storm sewer. Township is in need of a dedicated funding source for the repair, maintenance, and replacement. And by no means, these are all suggestions. These are things I'm putting forth. Possible funding mechanisms, a stormwater utility, bond issues. Here's a pipe we dug up on at North Wayne. You folks might have seen the barricades that were there by South Wayne and Windermere. That lower right-hand portion, that picture right there, that's what we found, an old pipe that really had no top. It had a piece of metal placed over it. The gentleman up top is putting a camera in there to see what we can see. And that's how we try to get the inside look at our pipes. Traffic signals, aside from the fact that people hit them, we had one in the middle of Wayne yesterday where somebody hit the controller. That's a pretty pricey repair. We own 44 signalized intersections. Some of these boxes are 40 years old. So from a replacement standpoint, we have two options. We can just wait till it goes, and then we're in somewhat of a pickle because we have an intersection that's not working properly and we're under an emergency to replace it. If we go on a planned replacement system, we can start to go through and modernize these. And again, suggestions of replacing so many a year for periods of years. Just to give you an example, we still have school signals that are neon. The only problem is when their controller goes, the new controllers don't work the neon. So we end up having to go through and get a whole new signal. Bridges. PennDOT inspects our larger span bridges. They give us reports. As they're received, the only one I have at this point, there were some maintenance items which we addressed. They were actually signs. As those reports come in, we'll be able to use them to create budget items for things, and they actually list them in order of priority. Many of the smaller culverts and bridges were inspected by Gilmore & Associates after Hurricane Irene. Most items were maintenance, and we're addressing them over time. There was nothing mission critical. More will be determined upon receipt of PennDOT reports. So that's the big part of the infrastructure, pipes in the ground. Now we're going to look at facilities. And then we broke that down into was the parks, active recreation, and then the rest of the buildings that the township is responsible for is connected to. I won't go through each one. Some of these are pretty small, and the costs, although they're costs, they're not large in compared to our budget. Let's go to Beau Connor Park on South Devon. In the Chagrin Valley report, this was noted as a potential stormwater management facility. If you look down there, probably one of the biggest things in there, if you know Beau Connor Park, you know it's got a really wet spot, and we need to do work to get that drained if that doesn't become a stormwater management facility. But just looking at that, there's still, in the next 5 years, we could, if so approved, and move forward, spend $50,000 on that park. The Capelli Golf Range, Glen McCrone Park, there's a lot of action here. There is an existing comfort station. What we have bantered about in staff is actually reconfiguring that park, and there was a grant myself, Tammy Cohen, and Melissa Kahn were looking at it to get money for a master plan. That did not pan out, but currently the existing restroom does get vandalized pretty frequently, and the thought would be to move the restroom, if we did put a new restroom in, move it closer to Conestoga Road, be easier for folks in the parking lot and the parents with their kids on the swing sets to actually access it. You'll see the tennis courts resurfacing, the comfort station, swing set 3-bay. There's an asphalt area down by the tennis courts and the basketball courts which does absolutely nothing other than just be an impervious surface that really should come out and return back to grass. Callan Park, the asterisk is the board did award the replacement of the comfort station to a firm who will be starting soon. And you'll see some other costs. Some of these items that go beyond 10 years we really didn't delve into because they're so far beyond. Most of everything we're talking about is in a 0 to 10 year period. Basketball court resurfacing. That also, I know everybody's very familiar with the flooding that occurs down by Willow. That's also a potential stormwater management facility site. Ditmar Park, there is a comfort station there, and we're saying in about 10 years we should look at replacing that. Emlyn Tunnel Park, Garrett Avenue. Now this is owned by the Radnor School District, but we in agreement, we're on the hook for maintenance. Here we have had a lot of requests for a comfort station, so it's shown, just to let the board know that this is out there. And that's by far the single largest expense. And if you wonder why there's such a difference between Cowan Park and this park for a restroom, is because there's nothing here. At Cowan Field, it's a direct replacement. Here, there's nothing, so utilities have to be run. Enke Park, right by the Township building, great park for Little League, always being used. We know that a comfort station has been requested there. This is also a potential stormwater management facility area. Fenimore Woods, here's some great pictures. You can see the stables, you see the pavilion, and probably the largest, well, by far the largest item there is the pavilion has really been let go into a state of disrepair, and the stables also, and that's where the restroom is. And what we're suggesting is that they would be removed and one new pavilion comfort station would be built, modern, clean. I think everybody would enjoy it. But you'll see there's some other things. There's stream bank restoration, paving of the lower parking lot. Friends of the Radnor Trail, or Fort, as Tammy calls it. There's some items in there, nothing too large. Harford Park, the largest thing there is resurfacing the driveway. Now you'll notice, even though the Kreuzberg Center is at Harford, that's not shown here because that's part of the buildings when we get further on. Ithan Valley Park, paving and fencing. The Nature Park, some signage and paving. North Wayne Field, owned by the Radnor School District. This is the current site of a stormwater management system which the board granted money for us to repair. It's also the potential site of an expanded stormwater management system. And we did about $18,000 worth of fence repair this year. There is more. And the parking lot, we'd like to see that, if this park remains in that capacity, we'd like to get that paved because when we do get heavy rains, those stones wash down onto the neighbors. Odoricio Park, potential site of a stormwater management system. And there's some grading issues with that field. That's what that $30,000 is. That's a comfort station, a replacement. That's in that 10-year period. Petrie Park, not much to be done there. Radnor Memorial Field, I don't know if anybody's been by there, but it's great to see folks playing on the turf. And I mean not the organized teams, but you'll see just kids out there with their friends. It's very nice to see. We're on the hook for a portion of the painting of that pedestrian bridge. That's that big number there. For the comfort station there, what we're recommending is using a different type of siding that we feel will get a really good useful life out of with minimal maintenance, as opposed to the wood that has to be stained and constantly cleaned. The Radnor Trail, again, just everybody needs to know, these are suggestions. Things can slide within these categories. In about from now in the next 5 years, if you go on the trail and you notice the stone portion of the trail, at one point that's going to need to be redone with stone for its 2.4 mile length. The same with the paving. That's the bigger number, $150,000. There's fencing numbers in there because there's always fence to repair or replace. St. David's Community Park, nothing in the short term except a sign that'll let everybody know, that follows our current sign standard. We would recommend that we put one there that would tell everybody it's St. David's Community Park. Sawmill Park, not a whole lot of expense there in the next few years. The skate park adjacent to Enke Fields in the Township building, definitely in need of some equipment powder coating. Skunk Hollow Park, Just a sign. Unkiffer Park. Now, if you'll remember, there is a subdivision up the street from this, slightly west, and they are going to do some improvements in this park for the township. That's why we don't have much money in there. Warren Philippone Park. This is another potential stormwater management site that was called out in the Chagrin report. And there's not any major items in there other than maybe in about 10 years we've got to do some paving in the parking lot. Again, we're suggesting refinishing the comfort station, not replacing it. And then there's just the normal maintenance to the other fields. The West Wayne Preserve, just in 10 years, maybe a sign. Okay, the Willows Mansion, and this is a little confusing because we did this in several ways. We looked at it two ways. What if we were to go in there and just try to bring everything up to snuff, replace the gutters, the roof, refinish the wood panels, refinish the floors, paint the exterior, paint the interior. And please remember, these are not bolted down numbers. These are very general estimates. And that's one grouping. Now, if you look at code upgrades, if that's what it came to be, and we had to replace wiring and plumbing and install an elevator and ADA compliant bathrooms and all that stuff, it's a huge number there. It's you know, a six-figure number. The Willows Cottage, somewhat similar. Roof, we've painted it before. We truly believe that needs to be, something more than paint needs to be done to make that look like it should. The garage windows, there's replace, a lot of the windows are new, but the trim is rotted. Gutters. Again, there's a number for code requirements, if depending on the usage. That's the biggest thing that the township will have to decide in the future, the usage and the frequency of that usage. This is the Willows, the park. So we split it. You have the cottage, the mansion, and then the park. I think anybody who drives through there knows that the driveway is in pretty bad shape, and it's past the point of just resurfacing. There's a lot of base repair. You can see that it's got the tire ruts in it. We'll talk about the water line replacement in a little bit. This is just something, the comfort station, there is no comfort station there. We use a porta potty, and we've all thought, and we've heard from the public, that it would be great to actually have a true comfort station there for folks to use when they're just using the park. Picnic tables, pond dredging at one point. The Willows water line, built in 1927 for Mr. Zanzinger's home. It's ruptured 3 times in the last year. If you folks, when we're done, there's 2 short pieces of pipe over there. They're black. That's a 6-inch interior diameter pipe. When you look in there, it looks like a mountain range. That's what that pipe looks like on the inside. And we've had a lot of breaks in that pipe, and truly feel that we will have many more. The cost to replace that is about $110,000, and we're recommending that it should be replaced in 2012. Replacing it, you know, when the break occurs, this last time when the board granted us money to get that fixed on an emergency basis, that was quite a tenuous situation to try to actually find decent pipe to make the connection to repair it. That's what kind of shape that's in. Here's on the right are pictures of that water line repair. On the left is some of the fencing that needs to be repainting and an old scoreboard. So again, please note, these are general numbers. There's a little bit of duplicity in the Willows number and in the mansion, but the park's total cost, if you look at it from a 0 to 5 years, is 1.4 million, an additional million. So all told, it's you know, you're getting up 2.8 million.
Steve, I'm a little confused. Is this the sum total of?
All those different parks, Enki Park, the Willows.
I don't think your totals are right then. You're excluding the buildings?
Yeah, this is not the buildings. This is just the parks, the active recreation.
So when you say Willows Mansion, that's not in the total there?
Not in the parks cost total now.
Okay, got it.
That actually slides up into this grouping here. The slide's out of order. My apologies. The Radnor Activity Center at the Sulpizio Gym, owned by the Radnor School District. I think everybody's pretty familiar with a lot of these prices. You know, for roof, electrical, plumbing, we are going out to bid very shortly. That's going to be on the streets. There's another number in there for code upgrades, if that is required. and a power-operated backboard system that's ancient, and that could total up to $400,000. The Kreuzberg Center, based on a main light school night presentation, and I see her here, Rachel Leibson, who's the head of the mainline school night. We met with her. They engaged the services of an architect, and in a perfect world, to make that building fully utilized for all their types of activities and teaching, you're looking at a $2 million cost. Now, the Chiquiri House at Harford Park, which is down the driveway from here, is slated for possible demolition. The Wayne Senior Center, a complete renovation, taking the entire interior, going back to brick walls and coming back in, is on the magnitude of $600,000+. The Township building, I know it's a new building, but believe it or not, there are some issues. Parking lot, soon, 5 years, we should really seal that and restripe that. Roofing, we show that's going to be beyond 10 years, although we do get roofing repairs. The HVAC system, there's some issue going on. It may be a control issue. The system in general should last out into that third category. I don't know if folks remember the original plans, but there was additional parking shown outside where the police are. That was never installed, and it did require a DEP permit that was never followed through on, but if that should be done, that's noted. At one point, we should power wash the exterior. You can already see some of the coloring on there. So short term, $100,000. Radnor Memorial Library, Kathy Mulroy gave us a really nice list of things, as well as a strategic plan outward. My goal was not to look at the what ifs, what could be, what we're looking for in the future. It's really bricks and mortar, what do we need to take care of today? But I'll share that with the board because it was very nicely put together and very thorough as what they need. But these are just some of the immediate maintenance issues that need to be done. Stone walls, concrete, ramp, doors, fencing around the air conditioning units, bathroom repairs. There's an asterisk on the replace HVAC rooftop units. We applied for a grant. So if that grant was awarded, the township, the net liability to the township exposure is $187,500. I would like to thank Kathy Mulroy for that information. Municipal parking lots, we have several, and they haven't been resurfaced in a long time. Again, these things can slide. We can repair parking lots. We can patch parking lots. Not saying they all have to be resurfaced tomorrow, but from a facility standpoint, we need to look at this if at one point we do wish to do that. So in the next 5 years, you're looking at the South Wayne lot, the West Avenue storefront lots, the North Wayne Avenue storefront lots. You're looking at $93,000. It's not tomorrow, and the reality of it is, if we reevaluate them in a certain amount of years and they don't need it, we don't request it. It slides out. Same thing on the latter portion. The Public Works Garage, yes? Pardon me? The Glenbrook we didn't list because we knew that was going to be resurfaced. So I didn't even put that on there because I figured that's going to be well beyond our 10-year. Correct. My mistake. Thank you.
It's in bad shape.
And we will make sure that's reflected on here. The Public Works Garage, this is where we are. It's a fantastic facility. Couldn't ask for anything better. Our biggest problem is, if you look at the concrete over by our tanks, that actually moves when a car drives on it, but the board did allow us to go out to bid for that. Our biggest problem is the parking lot. I mean, we're not that old, and you can see it's all torn up. And when our trucks go over it, you can see it heave and water comes up. And that's why it's such a big number, because this is not just a go in and resurface. This is base repair, geotextile fabric, Tensar geogrid, by far the biggest issue. We're just, again, like on the replace HVAC, that's based on what we think the lifespan of our current system is. If it lasts well beyond that, fantastic. It's just showing that there is an exposure there at one point. The roofs, that's the same thing. We're not saying that all our roofs have to be replaced in the next 10 years, but we should be aware of the cost if that comes to pass. And that's where those numbers are. The truck lifts, it's beyond 10 years. So here we go with a total cost for infrastructure. Sanitary sewer, over the 10-year period, it's 3.6 million. Storm sewer, flood mitigation, that's directly taken from the Chagrin Valley report. The traffic signals. So the total for infrastructure is on the magnitude of $50 million. Again, 45 of that being the Chagrin report. The total cost for the facilities in the 0 to 5 years, 6.7, 5 to 10, 1.6. You can see the magnitude of that. So the total cost of infrastructure and facilities in the total 10-year period is close to $60 million. Just a note, if you can see, it's tough for you folks to see, but on that picture on the left, that's the new pipe that's going in on Conestoga Road in that emergency repair. And next to it is the storm sewer pipe that's falling apart that is 2-foot terracotta sections, which alone tells us it is many, many, many years old. Keys to infrastructure and facility ownership. Planning. Needs analysis. Do you need this, and what do you need exactly? The cost analysis. And in Europe, it seems they look much more further down the road. We're not just supposed to look at how much it costs to build something and what's the cheapest way to build something. We need to look at the life cycle costs, because sometimes if you look at that whole life cycle, a more expensive building in construction may actually become a cheaper building to own as time goes on. So what I'm just trying to stress here is we need to do the cost analysis, and we need to be prepared to do the life cycle cost analysis within that. Preventative maintenance should be funded and implemented. It's like your car. You should change your oil as per the manufacturer's recommendation. If you don't, you might get lucky, or you might be on the side of the road with a seized engine. And planned replacement and upgrades should be funded and implemented also. And before I turn it over to the manager, if I could just point out a few folks from the Public Works Department that are here that helped do this. Paul Basic, if you would stand up, please. Paul Tatara, Rick Petrella, Bill Cassidy, Mark Dominic. Who else? Who did I miss? Steve Amarant. And these are all folks that helped put this together. And I'll turn this over to the manager.
All right, thank you, Steve. Before I get into the final recommendation for the board, I just want to thank the staff and recognize the hard work and efforts of the entire Public Works staff. A lot of the jobs, they're not pretty, but they're on call 24/7, 365 a year, especially when you look at storm sewers, what they have to get involved with. What they do on a day-to-day basis really keeps these systems going, given the age, given the challenges that are there. They do a phenomenal job, and I don't think I can say thanks enough to what they do. When we look at recommended actions for the board, first, what we're looking for from the board is to establish a priority list for all sanitary sewer projects. Fortunately, there is a funding mechanism in place currently in the sanitary sewer fund. Consider adopting a sanitary sewer tap-in fee, which again is paid for by developers, businesses making renovations, that they would pay that cost when they look to tap into our current system. Establish a priority list for all storm sewer infrastructure projects. Discuss and prioritize flood mitigation and stormwater management projects, which there are a number of them, and I think using the reports, especially the Chagrin Valley one, will be very helpful. Discuss the stormwater sewer infrastructure and stormwater management funding plan. Currently, as you're aware, there is no funding mechanism in place to fund those types of repairs. Prioritize the traffic signal maintenance projects, and Steve pointed out that the other day we had an accident in which someone took out the controller at North Wayne and Lancaster, which we know that cabinet probably will cost us about $40,000, and hopefully the lines are in good shape, because if not, that number is going to jump up probably by $25,000, $30,000. So that's, again, a concern when those types of things happen.
Insurance companies aren't responsible for that?
We hope they have insurance, and we hope that they pay.
Yeah.
So yes, we do have that information, so we plan on that. However, the township does have we hope that it's fully funded by their insurance company, but if not, there's at least a deductible from the township of about $10,000. Determine the township's role in facility ownership. Again, Does the township want to be in the business of owning certain facilities? Determine necessary funding source to upgrade, maintain, and manage those facilities owned by the township. One of the recommendations from the administration will be in for the board to consider is selling certain township-owned facilities, which could include the township building, the Kreutzberg Center, which is a possibility to work with Mainline School Night on that, the Wayne Senior Center, working with the Wayne Senior Center to see if there would be some consideration in that, along with other facilities that the township may look at. Consider terminating certain lease agreements of facilities not owned by Radnor Township, as well as determining the maintenance levels and amenities that the township-owned parks. What areas do we want to maintain and to what level? And I do want to say that the park staff does a tremendous job at what they do in maintaining the park levels, and I think we could probably see some of that degradation of service in certain areas that we have cut now from townships' priorities of the level of maintenance and how that has taken a dip. Establish long-term maintenance plan, as well as including a funding mechanism for the maintenance, upkeep, and repair of those improvements when we take on certain responsibilities of parks and recreation areas, that we know that there's a maintenance cost associated with that, that we take into account of those as we continue to move through looking at our parks and facilities. Prioritize resurfacing or improvements needed at township parking facilities to include the parks, the municipal parking lot areas, township facility parking lots, the trail, and then to determine a funding mechanism to implement the parking facility improvements and repairs. I know the numbers look big when you total them all up, but again, this is like a lot of the other items that we've looked at that the board has considered so far. It's not where these things all have to be done tomorrow, where we have to come up with that check. This is part of, I think, with the administration, the board working together with CARFAC and with our community groups and organizations and the community to come up with a plan that we recognize that these are issues we have. They're not going to go away. We can't walk away from these, but to start putting those plans together of how we're going to address these, that when revenues come in, that we earmark those, which the board did already with certain excess in budget if we have a happen to have a good year, that those are actually automatically sent to those areas that we have deficiencies in. So a lot of those things that the board, we are continuing to work on. And again, part of that is the short, mid, and long-term plans. And as Steve talked about, some of these don't have to be done today, but we have to start recognizing and addressing these, especially going out and looking at a lot of the sanitary projects and looking at some of those repairs that we're doing right now. When you see the holes there that are open and you see the condition of the storm lines, that we know those are expenses that are going to come, and that we end up making the repairs for the long term. We fix them, we do them the right way, and we move on, because we can't continue to do that Band-Aid effect where we patch it now because we only know it's going to get worse. And I think a lot of that is using the expertise of our staff that we have and their knowledge and their experience, because they deal with it day in and day out, and I think they have a great insight of where we need to go. So the board, the administration, we're working on these plans that we've gone through so far with direction from the board, and again, we just look at continued guidance from the board of what direction we need to go. And with that, I guess we'll entertain questions from the board.
I know that having served a number of years as commissioner, what we did was every 5 or 6 years we'd go out and borrow another $6 or $7 million to continue to deal with these problems. When things hit in 07 and 08, we realized we couldn't afford to do that anymore, just go out and borrow $6 or $7 million every 5 or 6 years to deal with all our problems and prioritize things. So we did have money on a regular basis to take care of a lot of things. The last 4 years we haven't had any money to take care of things. So we're going to have to look at this and see how we're going to do it. And it's going to be tough going the old system where you just go out and borrow money all the time. So that's right. So the last 4 years the board has come to the realization that we can't go out and just borrow money to do things, that we have to find a way to fund it, and that's going to be the key, looking for ways to fund things. And I know, I disagree with selling a lot of facilities and land and all those things, but if you want to look at it, we look at it. But one of the things that when you look at things realistically, like snow removal, I know you mentioned when you first came that we do it in 5 hours, but you could do it in 9 hours or 18 hours or 24 hours and you can reduce your costs. But if a resident, gets in a fender bender because we didn't plow the snow, maybe he would have rather paid the taxes than have to deal with a fender bender. And I know last night I played a softball game and the grass was 7 inches at the field, and every single was a ground rule double because the ball didn't roll. The grass was so high, so it was a ground rule double, and I lost my right fielder, carried him off the field because he slipped and had a bad hamstring. So, by doing things cheaper, you don't always serve the best interests of the community, and it costs the community. You might be saving money, but someone else is suffering and spending money. And that's what I, as a commissioner, have to look at, is that, yeah, we could save money by doing this, that, and the other thing, but what are the consequences? In the end, are we just pushing it off on somebody else and creating problems in the township? So we'll have a lively debate, and I'm looking forward to it.
I have a couple questions about, a bunch of questions. The sanitary sewer funding. So this year, I think I recall we had set aside about $400,000 for capital sanitary sewer investment. So if we have sewer rent at current levels, not changing, can we assume that we'll be getting around, that we could budget for about $400,000 or that neighborhood every year for the next 5 years? From that sewer rent, that we won't have to take out of our general fund?
Yes, absolutely. The one thing with the sewer fund to keep in mind, and in theory what you're saying is absolutely correct, the one thing that with the sewer rent is it's based on water consumption from the prior year. So Mother Nature does play a large role in the fluctuations of that income that's outside of our control. So if we have a really wet summer, chances are real good that the next year's sewer rent income is going to be lower than usual, and vice versa. So while it's reasonable to assume over the long term that would be accurate, we could designate that much every year. We just have to be sure that we're planning for those fluctuations.
Well, can't we handle that by adjusting our sewer rent so that it stays stable and doesn't go up and down?
Well, you can do it by adjusting the rate itself.
Yes.
The problem is you could have large fluctuations in that rent, in that amount. So an alternative might be you establish some balance policy within that fund to compensate for the increases and then the decreases, and then you're able to keep a more stable rate, which I think the people who pay the bills probably would appreciate a more stable rate than something that would jump up and down. I only say that as in the interest of full disclosure. The principle, Commissioner Schaefer, is right on, that we have the funding source. It should generate enough money that we should be allocating or carving out a piece of that for capital every year, like the $400,000 that we did for this year.
Right, and I don't remember what the slide said about the total sanitary sewer costs over year 0 to 5, but would 400 or that neighborhood times 5 probably cover that? So that's close. One area we're not in the hole. And I wanted to go down this road a little bit because sanitary sewer and storm sewer are often close to each other, right? They run parallel.
Yeah, it's like at Poplar, I said, if we were to do one utility project on Poplar, I would recommend both be upgraded.
Right, so, we should really be thinking in terms, when we're prioritizing about the storm, if we are investing this money we really already have this money or should have it without having to, raise more money, we should be doing those storm projects when we're doing the sanitary projects and piggyback off of that money that we have without too much pain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, Steve, you can certainly address the construction aspect. It would seem to make sense that if you're going into the ground anyway.
It just depends. Like in the older neighborhoods, I think it makes absolutely perfect sense because both systems are deteriorated. Where it may not need to be done is if a road storm sewer is in reasonably good shape, there's no flooding issues, and it has good carrying capacity. then I would say let's just go in, fix the sewer, and be done with it. But I think in the older neighborhoods, that whole look, that universal look is absolutely the way to go.
Well, and it looked to me like most of the sewer line projects we have are in the old neighborhoods.
And it's those old neighborhoods where we also have the most flooding issues.
Right, so
Makes perfect sense.
it makes perfect sense. So we're killing two birds with one stone, hopefully, when we open those roads. The newer neighborhoods, where in my neck of the township, most of the neighborhoods are 60s neighborhoods. And I notice we have some replacement. Is that replacement just because the age of what's in there, or because we're having issues over there? Or
On Marlbridge Road, there's a corrugated metal culvert, and that is rusting out at the bottom. In that development there's 3 very similar ones that were installed in the 60s, and that metal's starting to corrode. The Marlbridge Road is the worst one, so that also tells us we need to look at the pipes over there and see if that's an issue. But there's constant running water through those culverts, so that's going to contribute to that. But they are those smaller, yet not inexpensive projects that we need to do in some of the newer neighborhoods, if you will.
And we're replacing all of this with the plastic, the heavy plastic.
There's different choices for the culvert. We could go with a similar metal product, aluminized, or we could go with aluminum, which is going to last longer, or a concrete box culvert. So the idea would be, again, on that last slide with the key, is to take a strong look at what we're going to get from a life cycle standpoint. So maybe best to spend a little more up front if we know this is going to last so much longer with no maintenance. And that's what we'd have to decide if the project goes through.
And then my last question is, at the very end, you talked a little bit about preventative maintenance. And I'm wondering, the figures that you have put up for our buildings, with roof and painting and whatnot, I mean, do you consider those figures to include the preventative maintenance, or is that something that's in our operational budget?
Well, if we replace the roof on a building, again, we take a look at it, and hopefully that's a 20-year roof or longer. So conceivably, when that's done, the maintenance, other than very minor maintenance, is really not going to be an issue for years. I mean, a shingle may need to replace, or there's something that has to be done, but those are actually more or less in-house repairs that some really skilled folks here in Public Works, and they'll take care of that. So that would take that off the table from a maintenance standpoint. Right now, the solarium roof at the Willows, we've gotten prices, we've done some Band-Aids. We're kind of at the point where, from an in-house standpoint, we can't do much more. So, but if that gets repaired, that comes off the maintenance list for a long time, other than some minor things we can do.
Well, I guess my question is, when that comes off the maintenance list, the cost of that maintenance list, where's that in our budget? Is that in our operational, or is that in these repairs and upgrades? These are all capital. The maintenance we do is in our operational budget. The 01 general fund is where that comes out of. Okay. Well, those were my questions, and I just want to say thank you for putting this all together, and I wish your numbers were smaller, but I appreciate all the work that went into it.
To add to one of your points, there's a possibility that when Aqua, a lot of water line replacements, Pico with the gas line, that it's a possibility we could partner with them too as well, or if PennDOT, that this way it's the same thing. I think it goes back to what Steve and Bill had mentioned, when you open up the ground, this way there's possibility of sharing some of those costs in the restoration work as well, putting the road surface back in. So there is the possibility again that we could work with them and partner with all those different agencies, including PennDOT, to see if those options are available to us to help reduce our costs.
Right, because I would imagine a lot of the cost, of course there's the material and laying down, but you've got the digging, the flaggers, everything that adds to it, and why pay that twice, ever, if you're already in there? Right.
A couple questions.
Actually, Commissioner Nagel, that's an excellent point. We actually have a line item in the budget for MS4 for things that we have to do, water quality being one, dry weather flows being another. So yes, some of that is driven by that. A lot of it on the storm sewer side, we know the real big issues that we have right off the bat. We're all pretty familiar with them, whether it be flood mitigation or the culvert on Marl Bridge. What I'd like to recommend is that we start to get on a plan where we are inspecting more, which falls under the MS4, just like we do our sanitary sewers, and we can start to prioritize a list based on those televising, because corrugated metal pipe that's in the ground, I'm not saying, please, by no means, I'm just using this as an example. This is not the way all our pipe is. But oftentimes when you come upon a piece of old corrugated metal pipe, the bottom is completely rotted out. And really it's just held together by the dirt, it's in situ. And those are the things we need to seek out and make that priority list and come to the board and say, here's the issues we have, and that all will fall under MS4.
So is there anything that you're hearing from Delcora or RHM that may not have been considered in these costs?
Yes, Commissioner Nagel. RHM approached us, I guess, about 9 months ago. The City of Philadelphia is looking at reducing all the members' flows and increasing the penalties for our wet weather flows. And it's a huge number. So I volunteered and the manager approved for me to be on the steering committee, which hasn't met yet. But really what they're looking at, Delcora, which is the pump station that our group of townships goes to, and that goes to the Southwest Philadelphia Treatment Plant, is going through an Act 537. This board allowed us to join that. And what they're looking at is ways, they're doing a cost analysis. Should they have holding tanks? There was a meeting at DEP today on issues with the Darby Creek Interceptor. So those are huge costs looming out there that we just don't know about yet until all these analyses are done. But we could be paying considerably more for the treatment of our sanitary sewer if it still goes to Philadelphia. We could pay considerably more for our wet weather flows, which is actually a great segue to say, boy, we need to do work on our sanitary sewer so we're not sending rainwater to the plant and paying for treatment of our rainwater.
Do we have a quantification of our I&I problems?
There was I&I reports done, and Radnor, Haverford, Marple were their biggest, I guess, member, so to speak. And they come out and on our behalf, their crews are here and they televise and grout. And we've done some relining. Actually, Lantoga Road project, which is in design, actually the plans are on my desk for review. That's another project where we have a lot of pipe. I don't have a quantification of the amount of I&I, but Mr. Amarant over there, we had some meters in over at Midland Avenue, and on certain rains in that specific snapshot, our flows doubled. And if you look at the RHM graph of the members, when it rains, there's huge spikes.
Around town, I know my ward specifically, there's several streets that currently don't have sanitary sewers. So if, as we move forward, I mean, typically the way we would do one of those projects, the township would borrow the money and the people would repay it. With all these other expenses that are going to be issues as we move forward and try to get hookups from these people, I mean, are we going to have borrowing limits that are going to affect us? Or?
Within the legal debt capacity, we should be okay. So I don't think we'll hit those ceilings. We'll hit our ability to repay the debt long before we hit the legal limits on how much we can borrow. But that does bring up policy issues on tapping fees and how we go about funding those projects.
Steve, do you have any idea of how many homes are not on SOAR?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number with me.
And the Willows water main, that's a 6-inch main. Why can't we slip form that?
Looking at that pipe, we had conversations with Aqua PA because my first thought was it was theirs. Mm-hmm. And they provided some documentation that clearly listed it was private for Mr. Zanzinger. And we looked at the slip lining. That's one possibility. I think at the creek, no matter what, we would do a directional drill. Right. But if we if the board approves the project, I'll evaluate all methods and see. The one thought was it was less expensive to do the open cut for a portion of it as opposed to slip lining, but reserve that for the creek area.
And the last question I had was Kreuzberg. I thought from prior discussions that, with the exception of doing the sprinklers, that we were going to back away from Kreuzberg, and that any additional work there would be part mainline school night?
That we will have a discussion, further discussions with.
Okay, that's all I have.
Oops. Am I working? Two informational questions first, Steve. First of all, great presentation. Thank you for doing it and all the work that went on behind it. How long is that water line at the Willows, and does it run from the building all the way out to Darby Paoli?
It runs from Darby Paoli Road to the fire hydrant, which is right over the bridge, and then from the bridge, from the fire hydrant to the mansion, it's 1.5 inch copper. And our assumption is that the copper is in good shape. It's that 6-inch water line, and Aqua Pennsylvania has been on us to get a meter pit in to meter the flow coming off of Darby Paoli, and the possibility exists we may be able to go to a 4-inch to the fire hydrant. Really, the whole purpose is not only does it provide the domestic water for the mansion, it's also the fire hydrant for when the fire department comes. So that's our real goal, is making sure there's enough pressure and capacity there to, if it should ever come to pass, that they could put out a fire.
But we're talking well over 100 feet.
It's 1,000 feet, roughly.
Okay, thank you. The other informational question, John Nagel asked about regulatory requirements, and I notice on page 9 you have $75,000 possible expenditure in the first 5 years for the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System Phase 2 permit. Implementation fee by a federal mandate. What is
That's
that?
the MS4 that Commissioner Nagel was talking about. We are required, this is a big year, last year was a big year, we're required to do a certain amount of testing and other BMPs to stay within our permit. And that's what that was about. It's MS4.
So we have
an unfunded federal mandate.
a recurring, our permit renews itself every year as long as we pass certain.
We basically file a report, and from that report we get a response letter that says we've met or haven't met, and what is our plan of action if we didn't.
Okay. Well, this seems to be our meeting to talk about Radnor sewage. A lot of your presentation and our questions so far have been on that. You talked about this sewer or sewage tapping fee that would be imposed upon developers. We have no such thing now. If we were to go in that direction, why wouldn't we also try to impose it upon large property owners, such as our institutions, our academic institutions, our office buildings, and our restaurants?
There's some parameters to this. The Municipal Authorities Act of, I think, 1954 sets forth the parameters here. So you can't just charge, it is a specific fee that is determined on the cost of your system and your capacity at the treatment plant. So that's why they're giving us a proposal, because we don't know what that fee would be until they came through with that.
Who's they?
Gilmore and Associates is providing a proposal to determine what a tapping fee would be, because there's specific calculations. Like I say, you just can't say we're going to set an arbitrary fee. And the term EDU, equivalent dwelling unit, is used. So we're talking about capacity. It's a one-time fee for a new connection. So a building that's been in existence would not be charged the tapping fee. But a developer that's coming in, that's building an office building or a restaurant, who requires additional or new capacity, additional if it's redevelopment and you took it from a very soft sewer use like retail and turned it into a restaurant, they would require additional capacity, and they would pay so much per unit. And then that money is dedicated solely to sanitary sewer. It cannot be used for anything in the general fund.
Well, just as an observation, it seems to be unequal treatment. A new developer, a new organization coming in with a new development would be hit with this tapping fee because, as you say, they ostensibly are going to expand our need to supply the capacity to handle that sewage. But all the existing businesses and institutions, I assume, never paid a tapping fee. And we built capacity, or our predecessors built capacity for all of those organizations. So there's a little bit of an unequal treatment here.
I don't know that it's unequal because there's other townships where tapping fees were not instituted until later on. And another way to look at it is, and I'm not saying this makes it right, they're paying tapping fees in most other municipalities, and some of them can be as high as $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per unit that they purchase. I don't know what ours would be. That's what the study would be determined. But it's not a cost that is unusual to a developer. It's probably unusual that they don't pay one when they come to Radnor.
And two points now. When will our friends at Gilmore start this study, or if it's already been started, when will they, what's the situation? When will it be finished?
What they've been doing is gathering information from here, because it's quantifiable information. It's based on feet of pipe, diameter of pipe, carrying capacity. So they've been doing that work with the help of our sewer division to come up with a proposal that I can present to this board. So I would think, I just talked to Stu, who's the gentleman doing it for Gilmore. I would think sometime this summer I would approach the manager and the board with this proposal to see. And really there's going to be a huge choice there. Do you spend the money, depending on what that tapping fee is going to be, whether it's worth it or not?
It's going to be up to us to spend money?
If you accept the proposal, whether that's $5,000 or $10,000 for them to determine what the tapping fee would be, and then the end result of that would be to provide legislation to this board to adopt or not and move forward with. But there is going to be a cost with them doing all the calculations and further research to determine what a legal, they have to follow the rules set forth by the Municipal Authorities Act to make sure that it's legal and can't be overturned by, I've dealt with that in past lives, so it has to be on the money.
But presumably we would recover our money, our study costs, out of the tapping fees over time. Okay.
For new?
We have a connection fee.
Yeah.
But that's orders of magnitude smaller than usually what a tapping fee is. It's usually, a tapping fee is in the usually in the thousands of dollars per unit, whereas our connection fee, although it does slide, it's not on the same magnitude.
Well, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that Radnor is growing, and Bryn Mawr and Ardmore are dying. People want to be here in Radnor. But if we make it so expensive for somebody to develop here, they're not going to develop here. I mean, everybody thinks that a developer has billions of dollars, and we can charge them all these fees, and they're going to pay them. And, you know, it's not going to happen. If we continue to build, we got to look at these things we continue to build, because it's better to have them in here paying real estate taxes and mercantile taxes and business privilege taxes than trying to nickel and dime them for everything that we can get, because we're hurting. And that's one of the things we have to look at, and I'm going to look at strongly, because I want this town to grow. You know, I'm pro-development. That's where it is in Radnor Township. We can't stay the way we are. We have to move forward, or we're going to die like Bryn Mawr and Ardmore is heading down. They can't. Everybody wants to develop here in Radnor, and we got to make it easy for them to develop here in Radnor and make it inexpensive. We can't just consider that every developer has $1 billion, so we can come up with all kind of fees that they're going to pay. So anything you come up with, I'm going to look at it hard to make sure it's reasonable and it's fair.
That's a valid point, and it kind of reinforces my point in the beginning about unfair treatment between those that are already here and have their stake in the ground and new people that want to come here.
The people that have it in the ground have been paying the sewer rent for years. And the thing is, I think, don't the university pay like 30% of the sewer rent? Wasn't that one of the big incomes we get from the universities? So that, you know, we can look at the fee that we're charging, and, you know, 30% of it is going to be paid by our biggest users. And so that, you know, we're fortunate in the sewer, you know, that it's been a pay-as-you-go operation, and, you know, maybe we should continue to do that, because we should all pay to use the system.
You had several slides that showed us new comfort stations planned. And when I looked at those dollar numbers, I realized, and we just approved a new comfort station at Cowan Field. I think it was $85,000 or $86,000. And we're closing our ultra-modern facility doors here. Thank you. I guess I could ask my fellow commissioners, did we make a decision sometime in the last 5 or 10 years that we would not use portable toilets any longer in our parks, and we would go with comfort stations? And before you answer the question, bear in mind that sanitation is very important for all of us, but comfort stations have a way of also having sanitary cleanliness problems. And there's a maintenance cost to us to keep them going and keep them in good shape. There's also, of course, a capital cost to build those, in contrast to portable toilets, which have no capital cost and the maintenance is free. So maybe it's just a question that people would like to talk about.
I wasn't on that board, and so I have no idea, but yes, we prefer comfort stations in Radnor. That is the answer, in my opinion.
Just look at the trail where we had where we didn't have a comfort station. We had the ugly porta potties. Trust me, it's like night and day. It's like being in Radnor Township and not being in Radnor Township.
Well, for $200,000 or $300,000, we can eliminate the ugly problem. But if we're willing to hold our nose and close our eyes, maybe we could save $200,000 or $300,000 over the next 5 years and go with portable facilities.
In some of these parks, they are really heavily used, and especially at Tennell, which we still have a porta potty. And this is a first-class township. And having a porta potty on a heavily used, hundreds and hundreds of kids, one after the other. I fully support the comfort station over the porta potties.
Okay, I will not debate it any longer.
They're not going to get done unless we can find a way to the money. There are hope. It's a hope. It's not like, all right, we're going to do this, and we have to do it. It hasn't been done. We're doing Cowan Field because we got a grant. You know, we're not coming up with that money. That was a grant that we got. So we get a grant, we might do these other ones, but we're going to do them when we can afford to do them. And that might be a while yet.
My last question has to do with, Steve, you used the term at 3 of our parks, Cowan, Odoricio, and North Wayne, that we could look at potential stormwater management facilities at those parks. Has your department done much thinking about that? Or Bob Zankowski, have you done it?
Some of them were called out in the Chagrin Valley study, Philippone, Beauconnor. So it was looked at in the trouble areas, and it was actually noted in the report, where do you have ground? Where could you afford ground within the township to do stormwater mitigation, the flooding mitigation? And what's going to have to be our property, because that way you don't have to buy it. So that's why they focused in on Beau Connor, Philippone, the Levin tract, as well as some other places.
And if we attempted that at a athletic field, would that mean we would create a natural basin, not man-made, but natural, and then that of course would eliminate the use of our people using that field? Or would we attempt to do what we have at North Wayne Field, which is to build a basin underground and continue use of the field?
Or the Chagrin Valley Engineer study is another high-level look. So when you start to screw this thing down, the bolts, and look at the actual engineering, that's where those decisions have to be made. And that's where we go back to this page with the key. What do we want to do with that land? Usually, rule of thumb is a basin, just a large excavation, is less expensive to install and operate. The underground systems are more expensive, have somewhat less capacity as a rule of thumb, but you can get usable ground on top. You can get recreational area on top. So that's a big decision that'll have to be made if that's ever moved forward with. What's the trade-off? Capacity of stormwater, use of the park or the area that's chosen, and the costs. And just like with North Wayne Field, there are ongoing maintenance costs with underground systems, which we didn't do with North Wayne, and now we're prepared to do.
I don't want to take up too much time, but with regard to Cowan Field or Cowan Park, would we have to divert the stream? In other words, we would start at the dogleg of Willow Avenue with an underground pipe, take all that heavy rain water, like we're having right now, and pipe it underground and into this basin in Cowan Field?
The reason Cowan Field was looked at was because Willow is a place that receives flooding. That's one of our hot spots, if you will, and that's township ground in that low area. That's really as far as that analysis went. There's ground that we own in an area that gets flooding. No engineering was done on that.
But we wouldn't have a field. Like we'd have a lake at Cowan Park. There'd be no longer a playground. At South Devon and
Conceivably.
and Donna Lane, we no longer have a lot of those fields. We would just have another lake.
Well, not necessarily. You'd have an area where you would dump water and you'd only retain it, for a short period of time. Detention would be the better term, in which then it would recede itself into the system. So all you want to do is slow the amount that's getting into the system. Or again, too, like when it's raining right now, nobody's using the park. So it's okay to dump that volume of water, but then as how it drains itself out could be usable, depending again on the volume. But again, with a lot of these storms that have come down, you're not going to use those fields right away after those storms. So it's an area in which you can store water for a short period of time and allow it to go slowly into the system.
Well, everything I saw, the only way you store water at Cowan or South Devon is that you don't have fields there. You can't store water on level grounds.
The other option, as Steve said, is more expensive. Go underground. Keep the field, but put the tank under the playing field.
Like at the middle school, yeah. We got 20. Yeah, we get 20% reduction of downstream flow, and then they billed it was 13%, and it's probably 2%. So we spent $2.5 million, and we didn't solve any problem downstream.
Thank you to staff for providing this. I think that it's time for us to move from conceptual to particular. So you've outlined it. Now we just want to see the decisions we have to make. I doubt they'll be fun, but my sense is we got to get to them sooner rather than later. So that'd be my advice, to start getting particular with these things and put them in the form of votes before us.
Plan to incorporate some of this into the budget for next year?
Part of this would be the overall, all the different items that the board has talked about as we continue to move through June and July, that we'd put everything together as part of this plan that we have for 1, 5, and 15-year financial model with some anticipated revenues that will come in based on construction of projects that we know we're looking at here in the township. So not all of these look at increases to taxes or some other mechanisms. We think there might be some things that we can look at. But also, too, is we can't fund everything right now. And some of it's just like, and I know some of the commissioners have spoken about before, it's like a mortgage. You pay that off over time. And again, a lot of this we know over time, and there's a plan. So regardless, like we've said before, whether I'm here, staff's here, commissioners are here, there's a plan for whoever's here to say, here's what the thought process was, that you can change. Each and every year you look at it. Township does better, you can make some adjustments to that. If the township does worse, you make adjustments as well. And if there's opportunities that we can take advantage of, then again, you plug those in as we go.
Public comment? Well, thank the public for coming. We don't give you a lot of time to get to the mic. Public comment, and if you don't jump up, meeting's over. Yeah. So.
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. I have a slight objection to Mr. Spengler's statement that we could just continuing up the fee of the sewer fee so we always have a certain amount of money. I don't know about you, but I do the very best to keep my water usage low, and every year I have a goal to keep it just 10% lower than the year before. I have 2 rain barrels, they water my garden. I take short showers. All the things we could do. I would be really upset if I had curtailed my water usage, being a senior on a fixed income, to have you have the ability to just change the rates. So I was paying what I had paid last year despite my water conservation bill. We're running out of water in the world. So let us get a little bit of benefit by conserving our water. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Judy Sherry. I currently have the honor of serving on the Mainline School Night Board as chair. So just wanted to say just a few words. First of all, we've appreciated so much our long-term relationship with the township. And in particular this year, which has been a pretty challenging year for us at Kritzburg, the relationship we've had with the township staff. Because we've always gotten the impression that they want us to succeed as much as we want to succeed in that building. So thank you all very much. Just in looking at this particular year from our perspective, we really want to thank the township for the $90,000 for sprinklers to make the building safe for our students. But we also want you to know that we too have been pulling a pretty heavy load for a small nonprofit this year. We've spent almost $100,000 trying to get the building safe again for our students. We've put in hardwired smoke detectors, an ADA bathroom, we've done carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, and at this point we've only been able to occupy the first floor of the building. So our staff, which has been located elsewhere, would very much like to be in the headquarters of our organization. And it's important that right now as we go forward that we be able to plan and budget for it. Because as we started out this year, we thought, oh, $30,000 will bring us up to code, and then it was $80,000, and now we're up to $100,000. So our expenses have grown. And next year, the board's really pretty much said, we need to know what the budget is for next year. In your presentation tonight, we appreciate really the fact that the township really was very receptive when we brought in some architects to look at the building in a very ideal way and come up with a plan that we think would be very exciting for the building. But in your chart, that number is right now being compared to, I would say, more nuts and bolts numbers of some of the other facilities. So I think it would be helpful to us to have the township staff come in and kind of give us also a comprehensive nuts and bolts assessment so that no matter what happens down the line, and there have been some really kind of exciting proposals, but we want to be able to know next year, you know, where do we stand and how much can we expect to pay, because this is not our building and right now we don't have any kind of long-term lease on it. So I just thought I would kind of give you our perspective. We've enjoyed our relationship, as I said in the start, and we really appreciate the sprinklers and the fact that the building, I think, serves the public well. And as I recall, you did a survey at one point, maybe in the beginning of this year, and it sounded like Township residents really were anxious to have a good partnership with nonprofits in maintaining these buildings. And so we would like to certainly do our fair share in that. Thank you.
One, two, three. Anyone else? I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the staff for the presentation. And the commissioners will continue to get more and more work, and we appreciate it. Thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.